You're lying on the ground. It's 1.8 million years ago. The fire died hours ago, and now there's just a thin orange smear of coals and the enormous black weight of the African night pressing down on you. The air has gone cold, the way it always does once the sun is gone, and the grass around you ticks and rustles with 1,000 small movements you can't name. You're small. You're maybe 4 feet tall. You have no claws. You have no fangs. You can't climb a tree fast enough to matter, and you can't run fast enough to outpace anything that actually wants to eat you. And something out there in the dark does. It can see you. You cannot see it. It can smell you. Its night vision is built for exactly this moment. And to that thing, a sleeping human being is the single easiest meal in the entire savanna. Slow, soft, defenseless. Basically, a protein bar that snores. So here's the question. How are you not extinct? Because by every rule of nature, you should be. Our ancestors were not the top of the food chain. For most of our history, we were squarely in the middle of it. We were prey. We were hunted, dragged, and eaten by some of the most terrifying predators that have ever lived. And yet, somehow, against odds that are genuinely insane, that small, soft, fangless creature survived long enough to become you, sitting there, watching this, completely safe with a refrigerator in the next room. This is the story of how that happened. And I promise you, the answer is not, we were strong. It's so much weirder than that. Let's start with the predators, because you need to understand exactly what was trying to eat us before you can appreciate how absurd our survival actually is. Forget lions for a second. Lions are scary, sure, but our ancestors faced worse. Picture the African landscape of that era. It was not the tidy postcard savanna we imagine. It was a crowded, dangerous world, thick with giant hyenas, sabre-toothed cats, and creatures that have no living equivalent today. There was an animal called Dinofelis. The name literally translates to terrible cat. It was about the size of a jaguar, heavily muscled, with stabbing canine teeth, somewhere between a normal cat and a full saber tooth. And here's the part that should make the hair on your neck stand up. A South African paleontologist named C.K. Brain, working at a site called Swartkrans, proposed something chilling. He suggested that Dinofelis may have been a specialist. A predator that didn't just occasionally snack on our ancestors, but may have specialized in hunting hominins. A cat that looked at early humans the way a human looks at a vending machine. Now, is that proven beyond all doubt? No. It's a hypothesis, and a debated one. But what Brain found at Swartkrans is not a hypothesis. It's bone. In his 1981 book, The Hunters or the Hunted, Brain documented something that rewired how we think about ourselves. He found early hominin skulls with 2 neat puncture holes in them, and for years, nobody could explain them. They sat in collections, 2 small holes in ancient bone, an unanswered question. Then, someone took the lower jaw of a fossil leopard and held its 2 bottom canine teeth up to the holes. They matched perfectly. Let that sink in. A leopard had grabbed an early human by the head, sunk its fangs into the skull, and dragged the body up into a tree to eat it in peace. Leopards still do this today. They haul their kills high into the branches to keep them away from hyenas and lions, which is exactly how those bones came to pile up beneath an ancient tree, fossilizing in the same place for us to find 1,000,000 years later. We know this because the punctures fit the teeth like a key fits a lock. We were not the hunters in that story. We were the groceries. And it gets darker. There's a famous fossil called the Taung Child, an Australopithecus africanus, discovered in South Africa in 1924 by Raymond Dart. For decades, people assumed this little kid, who died around 3 years old, had been killed by a big cat. But in 2006, a researcher named Lee Berger took a closer look at the damage around the eye sockets and the skull, and he noticed something. The marks were strange, talon marks, gouges consistent with a large bird of prey. The Taung Child wasn't taken by a lion. It was snatched out of the world by an eagle. A massive raptor swooped down, grabbed a toddler-sized member of our family tree, and carried it off. We've watched eagles do almost exactly this to monkeys in the modern day. leaving identical damage, the same scratches around the eye sockets, the same punctures where the talons closed. So this wasn't a fluke. This was the menu. We were small enough that the sky itself was trying to eat us. So that's the situation. Cats on the ground, eagles in the air, hyenas in the dark. We were soft, slow, and outnumbered. By every law of survival, this should be a very short video. So how did we win? Here's the first answer, and it's the one nobody expects. We didn't get stronger, we got slower on purpose, in the most clever way imaginable. Let me explain. Most prey animals survive through speed. The gazelle outruns the lion. The zebra kicks and bolts. But our ancestors went in a completely different, completely insane direction. We didn't get faster than predators. We got more relentless than them. We invented endurance. In 2004, two scientists, Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman, published a landmark paper in the journal Nature with a title that sounds boring and is secretly one of the wildest ideas in human evolution: endurance running and the evolution of Homo. Their argument was this: the human body is a piece of machinery specifically engineered for one thing that almost no other large animal on Earth can do: run forever. Think about the things that make you weird. You have a giant tendon in your leg, the Achilles, that stores and releases energy with every stride, like a spring. You have a special ligament in the back of your neck, the nuchal ligament, that keeps your head stable while you run. Animals that don't run, like chimps and pigs, don't have it. You have huge gluteal muscles. Your butt is enormous compared to other primates, and it's not for sitting. It's for stabilizing your torso while you pound the ground for hours. And the big one, you sweat. You sweat from millions of glands all over your naked skin. And that lets you shed heat while you keep moving. Most animals can't do this. They cool themselves by panting. And you cannot pant and run flat out at the same time. A cheetah can hit 70 miles an hour, but it overheats in about 30 seconds and has to stop and pant. You can't outsprint a cheetah, but on a hot day, you can follow it until its own body cooks it from the inside, and it collapses, and you simply walk up to it. That's called persistence hunting. And some human groups, like the Sand People of the Kalahari, were documented doing it well into modern times. You don't catch the antelope. You haunt it. You jog after it in the midday heat for hours, denying it the chance to rest in the shade, reading its tracks in the dirt, never quite letting it disappear, until its temperature spikes and it physically cannot move. And you, calmly, are still going. We didn't beat the predators by being fast. We beat the environment by being patient. We turned our own bodies into a slow walking trap. But running down dinner is one thing. Not getting eaten while you sleep is a completely different problem. And to solve that one, we needed the single most important tool our species has ever discovered: fire. Let's go further into this, because fire is the hinge that everything else swings on. The oldest widely accepted evidence of controlled fire use by our ancestors comes from a place called Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. In 2012, a team led by Francesco Berna published findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Deep inside that cave, about 30 meters from the entrance, they found burnt bone and ash from plants. And the key detail is that depth, 30 meters in. A wildfire doesn't burn 30 meters into a cave. Something carried that fire inside. Something controlled it. And the date on those ashes is roughly 1 million years ago. 1 million years. Think about that for a second. Before there were modern humans, before there was language as we know it, before agriculture, before anything, our ancestors were already sitting in the dark on purpose next to a thing they had tamed. Picture that scene: a handful of small, hairy figures gathered around a flickering point of light, their faces lit orange, the cave walls dancing with shadow, and beyond the reach of the flames, the same darkness that had hunted them for millions of years, suddenly held back by a few feet of heat. And fire changes the entire predator equation. Almost every nocturnal hunter on Earth is instinctively terrified of it. A campfire is a wall. It's a wall that big cats won't cross, that hyenas circle but don't enter. For the first time in our history, the night, which had always belonged to the things with fangs, suddenly belonged a little bit to us. We could see. They could see us seeing them. The single most dangerous hours of our existence became survivable. But fire did something even sneakier than scaring off lions. It changed our bodies. There's an anthropologist at Harvard named Richard Wrangham, and he wrote a book called Catching Fire, built around an idea called the cooking hypothesis. His argument is that cooking food essentially pre-digests it. Cooking unlocks calories that raw food just hides from you. A cooked potato gives you far more usable energy than a raw one. Cooked meat is softer, safer, and easier to break down. It also means you spend less of your day simply chewing. A gorilla spends hours every day grinding through raw plants. Fire handed that time back to us. And what do you do with all those extra calories? You build the most expensive organ in the entire animal kingdom. The human brain burns roughly 20% of your total energy, while being only about 2% of your body weight. It is an absolute energy hog. And Wrangham's claim is that we could never have afforded to grow such a ridiculous, gas-guzzling brain on raw food alone. Fire didn't just keep the leopards away from our camp. Fire is, quite possibly, what let us grow the brain that outthought them. And that brain is the real answer. That's the secret weapon. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about human survival. We didn't win with our bodies. We won with what was inside our skulls. And crucially, with what happened between them. We cooperated. And we cooperated in a way that, as far as we can tell, no other animal on the planet ever has. Let's go further still. A single human alone in the savanna is, as we established, a snack. But 40 humans working together, communicating, planning, watching each other's backs are not a snack. They're a problem. They are, frankly, a nightmare. Because while one of you sleeps, another keeps watch. While one throws a spear from the left, another throws from the right. A leopard can ambush an individual. It cannot ambush a coordinated, communicating group that has assigned itself shifts. And we know our ancestors were doing exactly this, throwing weapons, far earlier than people used to assume. In a peat bog in Schöningen, Germany, an archaeologist named Hartmut Thieme excavated a discovery in the 1990s that stunned the field. Wooden spears, beautifully made, balanced javelins, carved with the thicker, heavier weight toward the front, exactly the way a modern competition javelin is designed to fly. The wood had survived for hundreds of thousands of years, only because the waterlogged bog sealed it away from the air that would normally have rotted it to nothing. And these spears were around 300,000 years old, made not even by our own species, but by an ancestor, likely Homo heidelbergensis. 300,000 years ago, our ancestors were standing back at a distance and killing things with engineered projectiles. That is the moment the relationship flips. When you can hurt a predator from 10 meters away before it ever reaches you, you stop being purely prey. You become something the predator has to think very carefully about. But the spear is a tool, and the tool is downstream of something deeper. The real thing. The thing that made us truly unkillable was language. A wolf pack hunts together, but it can't say, there were 3 of them yesterday by the river, so tonight we go a different way. A lion can't warn the others about a specific danger at a specific place at a specific time. But we could. Language let us store information that wasn't even ours. It let a grandmother who survived a leopard attack 40 years ago tell a child exactly what the warning signs look like, so that child never has to learn the lesson by dying. We could pass down survival itself as words across generations. We didn't each have to discover that fire scares predators. One of us figured it out, and then all of us knew it. forever. And that brings us to maybe the most beautiful, most overlooked piece of this entire puzzle, the grandmother. There's an anthropologist named Kristen Hawkes at the University of Utah who developed something called the grandmother hypothesis. And here's the riddle it solves. Human females are unusual. We live for decades after we can no longer have children. In most of the animal kingdom, that basically doesn't happen. Once you can't reproduce, evolution loses interest in keeping you around. So why do humans have grandmothers at all? Why didn't natural selection just delete them? Hawkes studied the Hadza people of Tanzania, and she noticed something. The older women, the grandmothers, were some of the hardest workers in the entire group. They dug tubers, they gathered food, they fed their grandchildren, which freed up the mothers to have more children sooner. A grandmother is a second engine. She's stored knowledge, extra hands, and a safety net, all in one person. And in a world that is constantly trying to eat your babies, having an extra experienced adult who knows where the food is and what the danger looks like is not a luxury. It's the difference between a bloodline that continues and one that ends in the dark. So our survival wasn't fangs. It wasn't claws. It was a grandmother who remembered. It was a group that shifted watch. It was a story passed down so a child could fear the right shadow. We survived because we were the only animal that turned other individuals into part of our own survival system. Now, let me be honest with you for a second, because this matters. A lot of what I've just described is built on evidence that is partial. Bones don't always tell the full story. Fire from 1 million years ago is incredibly hard to confirm, and scientists argue about these dates constantly and fiercely. The persistence hunting idea, the cooking hypothesis, the predation specialists, these are well-supported arguments, but they are arguments, not commandments carved in stone. In archaeology, there's a phrase you have to keep close. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found the campfire doesn't mean there wasn't one. We are reading a book where 99% of the pages have rotted away, and we are reconstructing the plot from the few that survived. But here's what survives every single argument. The result. You. The fact that you exist at all means the strategy worked. Every single one of your direct ancestors, without one exception going back millions of years, was good enough, lucky enough, or clever enough to not get eaten before they had children. Not one of them was caught. Think about that chain, millions of years long, through sabre-toothed cats and eagles and leopards and hyenas and ice ages and starvation. An unbroken chain of survivors, and the very last link in it is you, holding a glowing rectangle, perfectly safe. So let's go all the way back to where we started. You, lying on the cold ground 1.8 million years ago. Small, soft, fangless. The thing in the dark can see you. It thinks you're easy. But here's what it doesn't understand. You are not alone. There are others around you, and one of them is awake, watching the dark, feeding a few sticks to the coals to keep the light alive. There are sharpened sticks within arm's reach. There's a memory in your head, given to you in words by someone older, that tells you exactly what to listen for. And in the morning, when the sun comes up, you won't run faster than that predator. You'll do something far more dangerous. You'll remember it. You'll tell the others. And you will follow it across the open ground, under the high sun, for as long as it takes, until the heat does what your body never could. The predators were stronger. They were faster. They had the fangs and the claws and the night. And every single one of them is gone now. Most of them extinct. Their bones in the same dirt as ours. And we, the soft, slow, fangless ones, inherited the entire planet. Not because we were the deadliest thing out there, but because we were the only thing that learned to survive together, to remember, and to carry the dead's lessons forward into the living. And there's one more piece of this story, the oldest piece, the part that makes everything else possible. Because before the fire, before the spear, before the grandmother and the language and the long, patient hunt, something had to come first. Something had to make a frightened, hunted little animal stand up on two legs in the tall grass and look out over the savanna, far enough to see the danger coming before it ever arrived. And that single ancient choice is where the whole story actually begins.